Hey guys, and welcome to the reading of Book 6 of Chapman's Homer, the Iliad. Now, before I crack into this one, I wanted to give a brief overview of the meter and the rhyming composition of the poem because I had received a request to kind of flesh it out a little bit. The Iliad by Chapman's translation, is in iambic heptameter, which means 7 beats of an iamb, which is a short, long, short, long, short, long, short, long. So you do 7 of them in one line, 7 of those groupings. For instance, the first line here is, the gods now leaving an indifferent field, Greeks prevail, the slaughtered Trojans yield. Actually, I think that's the argument. So that is in iambic pentameter. So you can see there's only 5 of those such lines. Whereas when he actually starts the book itself, rather than the argument, he enters iambic pentameter or heptameter. The stern fight freed of all the gods, conquest without doubtful wings. That's 7 groups of these iambs. The stern fight freed of all the gods, conquest with doubtful wings. Whereas his later translation of the Odyssey is iambic pentameter all the way through, which is the usual English verse. You naturally go to iambic pentameter. Most of Shakespeare's plays are in iambic pentameter, as well as it's kind of the go-to English meter. And then, of course, he's rhyming in couplets as Chapman throughout this. So it's just AA, BB, CC are the rhymings. So field will rhyme with yield, if we get it up here. Field will rhyme with yield, retires, desires, fight, night, pride, sacrifice, and so on. So a couplet rhyming scheme with an iambic pentameter argument and an iambic heptameter verse itself. The Odyssey, he translated some 20 years later than this, is entirely in the iambic pentameter. And the Greek itself is in dactylic hexameter. So a dactyl as opposed to an iamb. Iamb was short, long, short, long, short, long. A dactyl is long, short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short. And the first line of the Iliad in Greek is menenai dathia piliedio achelios. So it's, you can see here, menena e dathia piliedio achelios is in dactylic hexameter, 6 of those dactyls. So that's where the translations come from. That translation doesn't work well going from the ancient Greek into the English, which is why you very, very rarely see dactylic hexameter in any of the English translations, and you never see it done well. So with all that out of the way, let's crack on to the reading of the 6th book. In this, we are going to have the Trojans have to fight a quick retreat, and Hector will get to see his wife Andromache briefly, and then after seeing her, is going to give a last farewell to both herself and his son Astyanax, and also his mother Hecabe. And it's going to be this emotional farewell before he goes out onto the battlefield to face his destiny. That's what the 6th book is largely known as, Hector's last time with his family. So here's Chapman's argument. The gods now leaving an indifferent field, the Greeks prevail, the slaughtered Trojans yield. Hector by Helenus' advice retires, in haste to Troy, and Hecabe desires to pray Minerva to remove from fight, son of Tydeus, her affected knight, and vow to her, for favour of such price, 12 oxen should be slain in sacrifice. In mean space Glaucus and Tydides meet, and either other with remembrance greet, of old twixt their fathers which inclines their hearts to friendship, who change arms for signs of a continued love for either's life. Hector in his return meets with his wife, and taking in his armed son in his hands, prophesies the fall of Iliad. In Zeta Hector prophesies, prays for his son will sacrifice. The stern fight freed of all the gods, conquest with doubtful wings, flew on their lances, and every way the restless field she flings betwixt the floods of Simois and Xanthus that confined all their affairs of Ilion, and round about them shined. The first that weighed down all the field of one particular side was Ajax, son of Telamon, who like a bulwark plied the Greeks' protection, and of Troy the knotty orders break, held out to light to all the rest, and showed them how to make way to their conquest. He did wound the strongest man of Thrace, the tallest and the biggest set, Eusorion Acamas. His lance fell on his casque-plumed top, and stooping the fell head, drave through his forehead to his jaws, his eyes night shadowed. Tydides slew Teuthanrides Axilus, that did dwell in fair Arispa's well-built towers. He had of wealth the well, and yet was kind and bountiful. He would a traveller pray. To be his guest, his friendly house stood in the broad highway, in which he all sorts nobly used, yet none of them would stand twixt him and death, both himself and he that had command of his fair horse. Calisius fell lifeless on the ground, Euryalus, Opheltius, Andresus dead did wound. Nor ended there his fiery course, which he again begins, and ran to it successfully upon a pair of twins, Aesopus and bold Pedasus, whom good Bucolion, that first called father, though base-born, renowned Laomedon, on Nace a Barbarea got a nymph that, as she fed, he curled flocks Bucolion wooed, and mixed in love and dead. Both these were spoilt of arms and life by Mecastiades. Then Polypoetes, for stern death, Astyanax did seize. Ulysses slew Percosius, Teucer Aratheon, Antilochus, old Nestor's joy, Ablerus, the great son of Atreus, and king of men, Elatus, whose abode he held at Upper Pedasus, where Satnius' river flowed. The great hero Laetus stayed Phylacus in flight. From further life Eurypylus, Melanthius left of light. The brother of the king of men, Adrestus, took alive, whose horse affrighted with the flight. Their driver now did drive amongst the low-grown tamarisk trees, and at an arm of one. The chariot and the drought tree break, the horse break loose and run. The same way other flyers fled, contending all to town. Himself close at the chariot wheel. Upon his face was thrown, and there lay flat, rolled up in dust, Atrides inward drave, and holding at his breast his lance, Adrestus sought to save his head by loosing his feet, and trusting to his knees, on which the same parts of the king he hugs and offers fees of worthy value for his life, and thus pleads their receipt. Take me alive, O Atreus' son, and take a worthy weight of brass and elaborate iron and gold. A heap of precious things are in my father's riches hid, which when your servant brings news of my safety to his ears, he largely will divide with your rare bounties. Atreus' son thought this the better side, and meant to take it, being about to send him safe to fleet, which when far off his brother saw, he winged his royal feet, and came in threatening, crying out, O soft heart, what's the cause thou sparest these men thus? Have not they observed the gentle laws of mild humanity to thee, with a mighty argument? Why shouldst thou deal thus in thy house, and with all precedent of honoured guest rights entertained? Not one of them shall fly, a better end for it from heaven, and much less dotting lie. Scape our revengeful fingers, all even the infant in the womb, shall taste of what they merited, and have no other tomb. Then raised Ilion, and all their race have more fruit than the dust. This just cause turned his brother's mind, who violently thrust prisoner from him, in whose guts the king of men impressed his ashen lance, which pitching down his foot upon the breast of him that upwards fell he drew. Then Nestor spake to all, O friends, O household men of Mars, let not your pursuit fall. With those he fell, for present spoil, nor like the king of men, let any scape unfelled, but on the dispatch them all, and then ye shall have time enough to spoil. This made so strong their chase, that all the Trojans had been housed, and never turned a face. Had not the Priamist Helenus, an augur most of name, willed Hector and Aeneas thus, Hector, Anchises' fame, since on your shoulders with good cause the weighty burden lies, of Troy and Lycia, being both of noblest faculties, for counsel, strength of hand, and apt to take the chance at best. In every turn she makes stand fast, and suffer not the rest, by any way searched out for scape, to come within the ports, lest fled into their wives' kind arms, they there be made the sports of pursuing enemy. Exhort and force your bands to turn their faces, and while we employ our ventured hands, through in a hard condition, to make the other stay, Hector, go thou to Ilion, and our queen mother pray to take the richest robe she hath, the same that's chiefly dear to her court fancy, with which gem assembling more to her Of Troy's chief matrons let all go, for fear of all our fates, to Pallas's temple, take the key, unlock the levy gates, enter and reach the highest tower, where her palladium stands, and on it put the precious veil with pure and reverent hands, and vow to her, besides the gift, a sacrificing stroke, of 12 fat heifers half a year that never felt the yoke, most answering to her maiden state, if she will pity us, our town, our wives, our youngest joys, and him that plagues them thus, take from the conflict Diomedes, that fury in a fight, that true son of great Tydeus, that cunning lord of flight, whom I esteem the strongest Greek. For we have never fled. Achilles, that is prince of men, and whom a goddess bred, like him his fury flies so high, and all men's wrath commands. Hector tends his brother's will, but first through all his bands made quick way, encouraging, and all to fear afraid. All turned their heads, and made Greece turn, slaughter stood still dismayed. On their parts, for they thought some god, fallen from the vault of stars, was rushed into the Ilion's aid. They made such dreadful wars, thus Hector toiling in the waves, and thrusting back the flood, of his ebbed forces thus take leave, so now runs your blood. In his right current forwards now, Trojans and far-called friends, a while hold out, till for success to this your brave amends. I haste to Ilion, and procure our counsellors and wives, to pray and offer hecatombs, for their states are in our lives. Then fair-helmed Hector turned to Troy, and as he strode the field, the black bull's hide, that at his back he wore about his shield, in the extreme circumference, was with his gait so rocked, that being large, both at once his neck and ankles knocked. And now betwixt the hosts were met Hippolochus' brave son, and Glaucus, who in his very luck hope of some wonder won, and little Tydeus' mighty hair, who, seeing such a man off of the field for usual blows, with wondrous words began. What art thou, strongest mortal men, that put so far before, whom these fights never showed mine eyes? They have been evermore. Sons of unhappy parents born, that came within the length of this Minerva-guided lance, and durst close with the strength that she inspires in me, if heaven be thy divine abode, and thou a deity thus informed, no more with any god, will I change lances. The strong son of Dreus did not live long after such a conflict dared, who godlessly did drive Nisaeus' nurses through the hill, made sacred to his name, and called Nisaeus. With a goad he punched his furious dame, and made them every one cast down the green and leafy spears. This Thomicide Lycurgus did, and those ungodly fears he put the foes in, seized their god, even Bacchus he did drive from his Nisaeus, who was fain with huge exclaims to dive into the ocean. Thetis there in her bright bosom tuck the flying deity, who so feared Lycurgus' threats he shook, for which he the freely living god so highly war incensed, that Saturn's great son struck him blind, and with his life dispensed. But small time after all, because the immortals loved him not, nor loved him since he strived with them, and his end hath begot fear in the powers to fight with heaven. But if the fruits of earth nourish thy body, and thy life be of a human birth, come near, that thou mayst soon arrive on that life-bounding shore, to which I see thee hoise such sail. Why dost thou so explore? Said Glaucus. Of what race I am, when like the race of leaves, the race of man is, that deserves no question, nor receives, by being any other breath. The wind in autumn strows, the earth with old leaves, when the spring the woods with new endows, and so death scatters men on earth, so life puts out again man's leafy issue. But my race, if like the course of men thou seek'st in more particular terms, 'tis this, to many known, in midst of Argos, nurse of horse, there stands a walled town, Ephyre, where the mansion house of Sisyphus did stand, of Sisyphus Aeolides, was wise of all the land. Glaucus was son to him, and he begat Bellerophon, whose body heaven endued with strength, and put a beauty on, exceedingly lovely. Proetus yet his cause of love did hate, and banished him the town, he rule the Argive state. The virtue of one Jove, placed beneath the other's power, his exile grew, since he denied to be the paramour of fair Antea, Proetus' wife, who felt a raging fire of secret love to him. But he, whom wisdom did inspire, as well as prudence, one of them advising him to shun the danger of a princess's love, the other not to run within the danger of the gods. The act being simply ill, still entertaining thoughts divine, subdued the earthly still. She ruled by neither of his wits, preferred her lust to both, and false to Proetus, would seem true, with this abhorred on troth. Praetus, or die thyself, said she, or let Bellerophon die. He urged dishonour to thy bed, which since I did deny, he thought his violence should grant, and sought thy shame by force. The king, incensed with her report, resolved upon her course, but doubted how it should be run. He shunned his death direct, holding away so near not safe, and plotted the effect by sending him with letters sealed that opened touch his life to Rheans, king of Lycia, and father to his wife. He went, and happily he went, the gods walked all his way, and being arrived in Lycia, where Xanthus doth display the silver ensigns of his waves, the king of that broad land received him with a wondrous free and honourable hand. 9 days he feasted him, and killed an ox in every day, and thankful sacrifice to heaven for his fair guest, whose stay with rosy fingers brought the world the 10th well-welcomed morn. And then the king did move to see the letters he had borne from his loved son-in-law, which seen he wrought thus their contents. Chimera the invincible he sent him to convince, sprung from no man, but mere divine, a lion's shape before. Behind the dragons, in the midst a goat's shagged form she bore, and flames of deadly fervency flew from her breath and eyes. Yet her he slew, his confidence and sacred prodigies rendered him victor. Then he gave his second conquest way against the famous Ptolemy, who, when he himself would say, reporting it, he entered on a passing vigorous fight. His third huge labour he approved against a woman's spite, that filled a field of Amazons. He overcame them all. Then set they on him slight a seat, when force had such a fall. An ambush of the strongest men that spacious Lycia bred was lodged for him, whom he lodged sure. They never raised a head, his deeds thus showing him derived from some celestial race. The king detained and made amends, with doing him the grace of his fair daughter's princely gift, and with her for a dower gave half his kingdom, and to his the Lycians on did power, more than was given to any king in goodly planted field. In some parts thick of groves and woods, the rest rich crops did yield. This field the Lycians futurely or future wanderings there, and other errors of their prince in the unhappy rear of his sad life, the errand called the princess brought him forth 3 children, whose ends grieved him more, the more they were of worth. Isander and Hippolochus, and fair Laodome, with whom even Jupiter himself hath heaven itself to lie, and had by her the arms of Sarpedon, called divine. The gods then left him, lest a man should in their glories shine, and set against him, for his son Isandrus, in a strife against the valiant Ptolemy, Mars reft of light and life, Laodamia, being envied of all goddesses, the golden bridle handling queen, the maiden patroness, slew with an arrow, and for this we wandered evermore alone through a Zalian field, and fed upon the core of this sad bosom, flying all the loath consorts of men. Yet had one survived him, those 3 children, Hippolochus, the root of me, who sent me here with charge that I should always bear me well, and my deserts enlarge beyond the vulgar, lest I shame my race, that far excelled all that of Ephyra's famous towers, or ample Lycia held. This is my stock, and this am I. This cheered Diomedes' heart, who pitched his spear down, leaned, and talked in this affectionate part. Certes, in thy great ancestor, and in mine own thou art, a guest of mine, a right ancient, King Aeneas. 20 days, detained with feasts, Bellerophon, whom all the world did praise, betwixt whom mutual gifts were given, my grandsire gave to thine, a girdle of Phoenician work, empurpled wondrous fine. Thine gave a 2-necked jug of gold, which, though I use not here, yet still it is my gem at home. But if our fathers were familiar, for each other knew I know not, since my sire left me a child at siege of Thebes, where he left his life's fire. But let us prove our grandsire's sons, be each other's guests. To Lycia when I come, do thou receive thy friend with feasts. Peloponnesus, with the like, shall thy wished presence greet. Mean space shun we each other here, though in the press we meet. There are enow Troy beside, and men enow renowned, to right my powers, whomever heaven shall let my lance confound. So are there of the Greeks for thee. Kill who thou canst. And now, for sign of amity twixt us, and all that these may know, we glory in th' auspicious rights of our grandsires did commend. Change we our arms before them fall, from horse then both descend, join hands, give faith, and take. And then did Jupiter relate the mind of Glaucus, who to show his reverence to the state of virtue in his grandsire's heart, and gratulate beside the offer of so great a friend exchanged in that good pride. Currets of gold for those of brass he did on Diomedes shine, one of 100 oxen price, the other but of 9. By this had Hector reached the ports of Scia and the towers. About him flocked the wives of Troy, the children paramours, inquiring how their husbands did, their fathers, brothers, loves. He stood not then to answer them, but said, it now behoves that shall all go to implore the aid of heaven in a distress of great effect and imminent. Then hastened he as excess to Priam's goodly builded court, which round about was run with walking porches, galleries, to keep off rain and sun. Within of one side on a roue of sundry coloured stones 50 fair lodgings were built, out for Priam's 50 sons, and for as fair sort of their wives, and in their opposite view 12 lodgings of like stone, like height, while likewise built a roue. Wherewith the fair and virtuous wives 12 princes, sons-in-law, to honourable Priam lay, and here met Hecuba, the loving mother, her great son, with her needs must be the fairest of a female race, the bright Laodice. The queen of gripped hard her Hector's hand, and said, O worthiest son, why lift'st thou field? It's not because the cursed nation afflict their countrymen and friends, there are their moans that move the mind to come and lift thy hands in his high tower to Jove. But stay a little, that myself may fetch our sweetest wine, to offer first to Jupiter, then that these joints of thine may be refreshed. For woe is me, how thou art toiled and spent, thou for our city's general state, thou for our friends far sent. Must now the press of fight endure, now solitude to call upon the name of Jupiter, thou only for us all? But wine will something comfort thee, for to a man dismayed with careful spirits, or too much with labour overlaid, wine brings much rescue, strengthening much the body and the mind. The great helm mover thus received the authoress of his kind. My royal mother, bring no wine, lest rather it impair than help my strength, and make my mind forgetful of the fair committed to it, and to pour it out in sacrifice. I fear with unwashed hands to serve the pure-lived deities, nor is it lawful thus imbrued with blood and dust to prove the will of heaven, or offer vows to cloud-compelling Jove. I only come to use your pains, assembling other dames, matrons, and women honoured most, with high and virtuous names, with wine and odours, and a robe most ample, most of price, and which is dearest in your love, to offer sacrifice in Pallas' temple, and to put the precious robe ye bear on her palladium, vowing all 12 oxen of a year, whose necks were never wrung with yoke, shall pay her grace their lives. If she will pity our siege town, pity ourselves, our wives. Pity our children, and remove from sacred Iliad the dreadful soldier Diomedes, and when yourselves are gone, about this work myself will go to call into the field. If he will hear me, Helen's love, whom what the earth would yield, and headlong take into a gulf and been quick before mine eyes, for then my heart, I hope, would cast her load of miseries. Born of the plague he hath been born, and bred to the deface of great Olympius, of Troy our sire, and all our race. This said, grave Hecuba went home, and sent her maids about to bid the matrons. She herself descended and searched out, within a place that breathed perfumes, the richest robe she had, which lay with many rich ones more most curiously made, by a woman of Sidonia, which Paris brought from thence, sailing the broad sea, when he made that voyage of offence, in which he brought home Helena. That robe transferred so far, that was the undermost she took, it glittered like a star, and with it went she to the fane, with many ladies more, amongst whom fair-cheeked Theano unlocked the folded door, chaste Theano, Antenor's wife, and of Chryseis' race, sister to Hecuba, both born to that great king of Thrace. Her Thilion's made Minerva's priest, and her they followed all, up to the temple's highest tower, where on their knees they fall, lift up their hands, and fill the fane with the lady's piteous cries. Then lovely Theano took the veil, and with it she implies the great Palladium, praying thus, Goddess of most renown, In all of the heaven goddesses, great guardian of our town, reverend Minerva, break the lance of Diomedes, cease his grace, give him fall in shameful flight, headlong, and on his face. Before our ports of Iliad, that instantly we may 12 unyoked oxen of a year in this thy temple slay. To thy sole honour take their bloods, and banish our offence, accept Troy's zeal, her wives, and save her infants' innocence, she prayed. Put Pallas would not grant, the mean space was Hector come, where Alexander's lodgings were, that manly a goodly room, had built in them by architects of Troy's most curious sort, and were no lodgings but a house, nor no house but a court. Or had all these contained in them, and all within a tower, next Hector's lodgings and the king's, the loved of heaven's chief power. Hector here entered, in his hand a goodly lance he bore, 10 cubits long, the brazen head, when shining ill before, helped with a burnished ring of gold. He found his brother then amongst the women, yet prepared to go amongst the men. For in their chamber he was set, trimming his arms, his shield, his cuirass, and was trying how his crooked bow would yield. To his straight arms amongst her maids was set the Argive queen, commanding them in choicest work. When Hector's eye had seen his brother thus accompanied, and that he could not bear, the very touching of his arms, but where the women were. And when the time so needed men, right cunningly he chid, that he might do it bitterly, his cowardice he hid, that simply made him so retired, beneath an anger feigned in him by Hector, for the hate the citizens sustained against him, for the foil he took in their cause, and again for all their general foils in his, so Hector seems to plain of his wrath to them for their hate, and not his cowardice, as that were it that sheltered him in his effeminacies, and kept him in that dangerous time from their fit aid in fight. For which he chid thus, wretched man, so timeless is thy spite. It is not honest, and their hate is just against it which bends. War burns about the town for thee, our slaughtered friends besiege Troy with their carcasses, on whose heaps our high walls are overlooked by enemies. The sad sounds of their falls without are echoed with the cries of wives and babies within. And all for thee, and yet for them thy honour cannot win. Head of thine anger, thou shouldst need no spirit to stir up thine, but thine should set for rest on fire, and with a rage divine chastise impartially the best that impiously forbears. Come forth, lest thy fair towers and Troy be burned about thine ears. Paris acknowledged, and as before, all just that Hector spake, allowing justice, though it were for his injustice's sake. And where his brother put a wrath upon him by his art, he takes it for his honour's sake as sprung out of his heart, and rather would have anger seem his fault than cowardice. And thus he answered, since with right you join check with advice, and I hear you give equal ear, it is not any spleen against the town as you conceive that makes me so unseen, but sorrow for it, which to ease and by discourse digest within myself I live so close, and yet since men might rest my sad retreat like you, my wife, with her advice inclined, this my addression to the field, which was my own free mind, as well as the instance of her words, for though the fall were mine, conquest brings forth her reeds by turn. Stay, then, this haste of thine, till I arm, and I am made a consort for thee straight. Or go, I'll overtake thy haste. Helen stood at receipt, and took up all the Hector's powers, to tend her heavy words, by which had Paris no reply. This vent her grief affords, brother, if I may call you so, that had been better born, a dog, than such a horrid dame, as all men curse and scorn, a mischief maker and man plague. Oh, would to God the day that first gave me light had been a whirlwind in my way, and borne to me some desert hill, or hid me in the rage of earth's most far resounding seas, ere I should thus engage the dear lives of so many friends. Yet since the gods have been helpless foreseers of my plagues, they might have likewise seen that he they put in yoke with me to bear out their reward had been a man of much more spirit, nor had nobler dared to shield mine honour with this deed, or with his mind had known much better the upbraids of men, and so he might have shown more like a man some sense of grief for both my shame and his. But he is senseless, nor conceives what any manhood is, nor now, nor ever after will, and therefore hangs, I fear, a plague above him. But come near, good brother, rest you here, who of the world of men stands charged with most unrest for me, vile wretch, and for my lover's wrong, on whom a destiny so bitter is imposed by Jove, that all succeeding times will put to our unended shames in all men's mouths our crimes. He answered, Helen, do not seek to make me sit with thee. I must not stay, though well I know thy honour, love of me. My mind calls forth to aid our friends, in whom my absence breeds longings to see me, for whose sakes importune thou to deeds. This man by all means, that your care may make his own, make haste, and meet me in the open town, that all may see at last he minds his lover. I myself will now go home and see my household, my dear wife and son, that little hope of me, for sister, 'tis without my skill, if I shall evermore return and see them more to earth, her right in me restored. The gods may stoop me by the Greeks. This said, he went to see the virtuous princess, his true wife, white-armed Andromache. She, with her infant son and maid, was climbed the tower about, the sight of him that sought for her, weeping and crying out. Hector, not finding her at home, was going forth retired. Starred in the gate, a woman called, and curiously inquired where she was gone. Bade tell him, true, if she were gone to see his sisters or his brothers' wives, or whether she should be at temple with the other dames, to implore Minerva's truth. Her woman answered, since he asked, and urged so much the truth. The truth was she was neither gone to see his brothers' wives, his sisters, nor to implore the ruth of Pallas on their lives. But she advertised that the bane of Troy suffered, and how vast conquests had made herself for Greece, like one distraught, made haste to ample Ilion with her son and nurse, and all the way mourned and dissolved in tears for him. Then Hector made no stay, but trod her path, and through the streets, magnificently built. All the great city passed, and came where, seeing how blood was spilt, Andromache might see him, calm, who made as he would pass the ports without saluting her, and knowing where she was. She with his sight made breathless haste to meet him, she whose grace brought him with all so great a dower, she that of all the race of king of Aetion only lived, Aetion whose house stood beneath the mountain Placius, environed with the wood of Theban Hippoplace. Being Corto, Cilician land, she ran to Hector, and with her, tender of heart and hand, her son, born in his nurse's arms, when like a heavenly sign, compact of many golden stars, the princely child did shine, whom Hector called Scamandrius, but whom the town did name Astyanax, because his sire did only prop the same. Hector, though grief bereft his speech, yet smiled upon his joy. Andromache cried out, mixed hands, and to the strength of Troy thus wept forth her affection, O noblest in desire. Thy mind inflamed with others, God, will set thyself on fire. Nor pitiest thou thy son, nor wife, who must thy widow be. If now thou issue, all the field will only run on thee. Better my shoulders underwent the earth than thy decease, for then would earth bear joys no more. Then comes the black increase of griefs, like Greeks on Ilion, alas, what one survives to be my refuge. One black day bereft 7 brothers' lives. By stern Achilles, by his hand, my brother's breath his last. His high-walled, rich Cilician Thebes, sacked by him and laid waste. The royal body yet he left unspoilt, religion charmed. That act of spoil and all in fire, he burned him complete armed. Built over him a royal tomb, and to the monument he left of him Thoriades, that are the high descent of Aegis, bearing Jupiter. Another of their own did add to it, and set it round with elms, by which is shown in theirs the barrenness of death. Yet might it serve beside to shelter the sad monument from all the roughness pride of storms and tempests, used to hurt things or that noble kind. Short life yet my mother lived, he saved and served his mind. With all the riches of the realm, which not enough esteemed, he kept a prisoner, whom small time, but much more wealth redeemed, and she in sylvan Hippoplace. Cilicia ruled again, but soon was overruled by death. Diana's chaste disdain gave her a lance and took her life, yet all these gone from me, thou amply renderest all, thy life makes still my father be, my mother and brothers. And besides thou art my husband too, most loved, most worthy. Pity them, dear love, do not go, for thou gone, all these go again. Pity our common joy, lest of a father's patronage the bulwark of all Troy. Thou leav'st him a poor widow's charge. Stay then in this tower, and call up to the wild fig tree all thy retired power. There the wall is easiest scaled, and fittest for surprise, and there the Iases Idomen, Thetrides, Diomed thrice, have both surveyed and made attempt, I know not if induced, by some wise augury, or the fact was naturally infused into their wits or courages. To this great Hector said, Be well assured, wife, all things in my kind cares are weighed. What a shame and fear it is to think how Troy would scorn, both in her husbands and her wives whom long-trained gowns adorn, that I should cowardly fly off the spirit I first did breathe. Did never teach me that, much less, since the contempt of death was settled in me, and my mind knew what a worthy was, whose office is to lead in fight and give no danger pass without improvement. In this fire must Hector's trial shine. Here must his country father friends be in him made divine, and such a stormy day shall come in mind and soul, I know, when sacred Troy shall shed her towers for tears of overthrow, when Priam, all his birth and power, shall in those tears be drowned, but neither Troy's posterity so much my soul doth wound, Priam nor Hecuba herself, nor all my brothers' woes, who though so many and so good, must all be food for foes. As thy sad state, when some rude Greek shall lead thee weeping hence, these 3 days clouded and a night of captive violence, loading thy temples, out of which thine eyes must never see, but spin the Greek wives' webs of task, and fetch their water be to Argos from Mesiades, or clear Hyperia's spring, which howsoever thou abhorrest. Fate's such a shrewish thing, she will be mistress, whose cursed hands, when they shall crush out cries from thy oppressions, being beheld by other enemies, thus they will nourish thy extremes. This dame was Hector's wife, a man that at the wars of Troy did breathe the worthiest life. Of all their army, this again will rub thy fruitful wounds, to miss the man that to thy bands could give such narrow bounds. But that day shall not wound mine eyes. The solid heap of night shall interpose and stop mine ears against thy plaints and plight. This said, he reached to take his son, who of his farm arms afraid, and then the horsehair plume with which he was so overlaid nodded so horribly he clinged back to his nurse and cried. Laughter affected his great sire, who doffed and laid aside his fearful helm, that on the earth cast round about it light, then took and kissed his loving son, and balancing his weight, in dancing him, those loving vows to living Jove he used, and all the other bench of gods, O you that have infused the soul to this infant, now set down this blessing on this star, let his renown be clear as mine, and equal his strength in war, and make his reign so strong in Troy that years to come may yield his facts his fame, when rich in spoil he leaves the conquered field, sown with his slaughters. These high deeds exceed his father's worth. And let this echoed praise supply the comforts to come forth of his kind mother with my life. This said, the heroic sire gave him his mother, whose fair eyes fresh streams of love's salt fire billowed on her soft cheeks, to hear the last of Hector's speech, in which his vows comprised the sum of all he did beseech in her wished comfort. So she took into her odorous breast her husband's gift, who moved to see her heart so much oppressed. He dried her tears and thus desired, afflicting not, dear wife, with these vain griefs he doth not live that can disjoin my life, and this firm bosom but my fate, and fate whose wings can fly. Noble, ignoble, fate controls. Once born, the best must die. Go home, and set thy housewifery on these extremes of thought, and drive war from them with thy maids, keep them from doing naught. These will be nothing, leave the cares of war to men and me, in whom of all the Ilian race they take their highest degree. On went his helm, his princess home half cold with kindly fears, when every fear turned back her lucks, and every luck shed tears. Foe slaughtering Hector's house soon reached her many women there, wept all to see her. In his life great Hector funerals were, never looked on any eye of theirs to see their lord safe home. 'scaped from the gripes and powers of Greece, and now this Paris come from his high towers, who made no stay when once he had put on his richest armour, but flew forth the flints he trod upon, sparkled with lustre of his arms. His long-ebbed spirits now flowed the higher for their lower ebb. And as a fair steed proud, with fallen mangers given, long tied up, and now his head stall broke, he breaks from stable, runs the field, and with an ample stroke measures the centre nays, and lifts aloft his wanton head. About his shoulders shakes his crest, and where he hath been fed, or in some calm wood washed, or stung, with his high plight he flies, amongst his female strength put forth, his beauty beautifies. And like life's mirror bears his gait, so Paris from the tower of lofty Pergamus come forth, he showed a sun-like power. In carriage of his goodly parts addressed now to the strife, and found his noble brother near the place he left his wife. Him thus respected he salutes. Right worthy I fear that your so serious haste afield may stay hath made forbear that I come not as you wish. He answered, honoured man, be confident, for not myself nor any others can reprove in thee the work of fight, at least not any such, as is an equal judge of things, for thou hast strength as much as serves to execute a mind very important, but thy strength too readily flies off. Enough. Will is not put to thy ability. My heart is in my mind strife sad, when Troy out of her much distress she and her friends have had, by thy procurement doth deprave thy nobleness in mine ears. But come hereafter we shall calm these hard conceits of theirs, when from their ports the foe expulsed high Jove to them hath given, wished peace, and us free sacrifice to all the powers in heaven.